This video is for educational and philosophical discussion purposes only. The intention is to explore facts, ideas, and logical perspectives on religion and philosophy without disrespecting any belief system or individual. We respect all faiths and their followers. If you find this topic sensitive, please watch with an open mind and understanding. Viewer discretion is advised for sensitive topics. Thank you for engaging with us thoughtfully.
Welcome back to Faith Lab. I'm excited to continue our logical fallacy series. Even though we're a small channel, I believe these topics are important to discuss. Special shout out to the 68 amazing subscribers who have joined this journey so far. Every single one of you matters. Before we dive in, remember our channel's golden rule. We're here to question, learn, and discuss, but never to mock or disrespect anyone's beliefs. Whether you're a believer, non-believer, or somewhere in between, you're welcome here. Today, I want to start with a case study, a conversation between two friends that I've created to test your understanding of what we've learned so far. Listen this dialogue carefully and see if you can spot the circular reasoning and hasty generalization we discussed in our previous videos. But more importantly, there's another logical fallacy hiding in there that we'll focus on today.
Hey Ahmed, I've been meaning to ask you something. You pray 5 times a day, right? I'm curious, what makes you so sure that Allah or God exists?
Well, that's simple. The Quran says Allah exists. And since the Quran is Allah's word, it must be true.
But how do you know the Quran is actually Allah's word?
Because look around you. Just last week I prayed for my sick aunt, and she got better. And my cousin prayed for success in his job interview, and he got the position. Prayer works. It's proof that God exists.
But Ahmed, people of other faiths also pray. And sometimes their prayers seem to work too. And sometimes prayers don't work, right? Maybe there are other explanations for why people get better or succeed?
Well, if you're so sure God doesn't exist, prove it to me. You can't, can you?
That's not really how it works, Ahmed. If you're making the claim that Allah exists, isn't it up to you to prove it? Like if I told you I had an invisible dragon in my apartment, wouldn't you expect me to prove it rather than asking you to prove it doesn't exist?
When you put it that way. You know what? This reminds me of how I used to argue with my little brother. When he'd claim he didn't eat the last cookie, he'd say, "Prove that I ate it," instead of proving his innocence.
Exactly. Look, I respect your faith, and I'm not saying you're wrong. I just think these are complex questions that deserve careful thinking. Maybe we can't prove or disprove God's existence with simple arguments.
You know what? You make some fair points. I guess I was jumping to conclusions pretty quickly there. Faith is important to me, but maybe I need better ways to think about it and discuss it.
Want another coffee while we keep talking about this?
Sure, but this time it's on me. And maybe we can talk about how different people around the world experience faith. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Have you ever had a friend tell you there's a ghost in their house? Or maybe someone claimed that they could read minds? In today's video, we're talking about who needs to prove what in any claim, the burden of proof. We'll look at how this applies to both everyday situations and religious claims. What is burden of proof? Think of it like this. If I tell you I have a pet dragon in my garage, should you believe me right away? Or should I be the one to show you evidence? The person making the claim is the one who needs to prove it. It's just like in court. The prosecutor needs to prove someone is guilty, not the other way around. In short, the burden of proof is the obligation to provide evidence for a claim you make. This concept is vital because it prevents debates from turning into endless cycles of baseless assertions. Without evidence, claims lose credibility and the conversation stagnates. Now let's look at some religious examples here. In Christianity, when someone says Jesus walked on water, they need to provide evidence beyond just saying it's in the Bible. And in Islam, when someone claims the Quran has scientific miracles, they need to demonstrate how these verses actually predict scientific discoveries, not just interpret them after the fact. And in Christianity, someone might also say, the Bible is the Word of God, so everything in it is true. The burden of proof lies on the person making this claim to provide evidence supporting the Bible's divine origin. Simply saying you can't prove it's false doesn't fulfill their responsibility. And in Islam, a Muslim might say, the Quran is the ultimate truth because it's from Allah. The burden of proof requires them to provide evidence for this claim. One of the most common mistakes in debates is shifting the burden of proof. This happens when the person making a claim demands that others disprove it instead of providing evidence themselves. For example, you can't prove God doesn't exist, so he must exist. This is not a valid argument because the lack of evidence against something doesn't automatically make it true. Or, my holy book says it's true. That's like saying Spider-Man exists because comic books say so. Or millions of people believe it. Remember when millions thought the earth was flat? Numbers don't make something true. Here's how to navigate in discussions effectively. Firstly, understand your role. If you're making a claim, be prepared to provide evidence. Secondly, recognize shifts. If someone tries to shift the burden onto you, point it out calmly. And lastly, ask questions. For example, what evidence do you have to support this claim? Don't forget to share this video with your friends because everyone can use a little more logic in their life. And hey, if you haven't subscribed to Faith Lab yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and join the conversation. Until next time, stay curious, stay logical, and keep questioning. This is Taha from Faith Lab signing off. Goodbye for now. You know, what makes this case study so fascinating is how it captures three important logical fallacies in one simple, everyday conversation. Let's walk through it together. It all starts with Ahmed's first attempt to prove his point. He tells Sarah that the Quran proves Allah exists because it's Allah's word. But wait, did you catch that? He's essentially saying it's true because it says it's true. This is classic circular reasoning, like trying to prove you're trustworthy by saying, "Trust me, I'm trustworthy." Then Ahmed moves to share his experiences, which leads to our second fallacy. He mentions how his aunt got better after prayers and his cousin landed a job. While these are meaningful personal experiences, he jumps to conclude that this proves prayer always works. This hasty generalization is something we all do sometimes. It's like assuming your lucky shirt works because you succeeded twice while wearing it. The conversation takes an interesting turn when Ahmed says, "Well, if you're so sure Allah doesn't exist, prove it to me. This is where the burden of proof comes in. Sarah brilliantly responds with her invisible dragon analogy. If she claimed to have an invisible dragon in her apartment, wouldn't Ahmed expect her to prove it? The person making the claim needs to provide the evidence, but there's something even more valuable to learn from this conversation. Notice how both Sarah and Ahmed keep the discussion respectful throughout. They're tackling one of the biggest questions humans have ever asked, yet they managed to do it over coffee. Using simple examples like missing cookies and invisible dragons, this shows us how we can discuss deep, meaningful topics without creating conflict. What's really powerful is Ahmed's response near the end. Instead of getting defensive, he reflects on Sarah's points and even connects it to his own experience with his brother and the cookie jar. This shows us that when we approach these discussions with openness and respect, we create space for everyone to think more critically about their own reasoning. This simple coffee shop chat teaches us that logical fallacies aren't just textbook concepts. They show up in our everyday conversations about things that really matter to us. But more importantly, it shows us how to discuss these topics in a way that brings understanding rather than division.